Welcome to the Recruiter Startup Podcast. My name's Dualta, and in this podcast series, I will be speaking to investors, advisors, entrepreneurs, and recruiters who are based all over the world, and we'll be discussing how to set up, scale, and operate a world-class recruitment company. I've got a world-class recruiter I'm about to interview on the podcast here. His name's Shawn Twomey, and I had the privilege of working with him quite some time ago now in Perth in Western Australia. I was coming to the end of my time in Robert Walters, and the guys hired this guy who had 10 years experience, and instantly you think, here we go again. Here's another guy who's going to be a bit tired of recruitment and come in and, not Shawn Twomey. He came in and set everything on fire. He is one of the best recruiters in the world and has a relentless tunnel vision focus that you just can't teach somebody. He claims he's mellowed. I'm not so sure, but he's definitely succeeded, and his career has gone from strength to strength from the time that I worked with him. And he's one of the things I find really fascinating and that he's an advocate for is he took a step back to take a step forward, and he explains why he did that and what his current role is in being the managing director of the Andersen Partnership. And in that, he's managing 6 offices, 70 billers, and he's still billing himself. So hope you enjoyed this one. Really enjoyed recording it and reminiscing on the old times, and hearing a great success story of somebody who did move across the world to advance their career and is now reaping the rewards for it. All right, so let me know if you enjoy this, and if you're interested in moving to Australia, hit me up. We work with Walker Anderson. We work with lots of other companies over there, and I'm more than happy to advise you on the marketplace there or any of the other key markets that we work in. And you could do a lot worse than do what Shawn did and what I did and move to Western Australia. A big shout out to our sponsors, Interview. I'm really grateful for the partnership that we have with Interview and for them letting me use their product in recompense for giving the odd shout out on the podcast here. I get a lot of value out of their product so far. As I'm speaking, I'm doing a lot of videos on their intro product, which means that I can send a video to my first LinkedIn connections. They can watch the video and then I'll know who's watched it. And I'm trying to do a video for every scenario so my team can automate as much of the process as possible and get me calls with the best people out there that I need from a client and a candidate perspective. So I'm really enjoying this collaboration and I can't recommend it enough. Shawn Twomey.
Dualta, how you doing?
Very well. We finally got through there. We had a bit of texting issues, but we're all good, right?
I'd say it's less to do with the tech and more to do with the 40-year-old who doesn't know how to use the tech.
Lad, you're only 40 years old?
Mate, recruitment is a rough business and it takes its toll.
God, 40 years old. That is some job. But you've made it now eventually. You're in the big time, right?
That's it now, mate. Cubans are out. Shoes are up. Easy life.
For those who don't know the man, the myth, and the legend, what do you do right now for a living?
So I've just moved across to be the managing director for the Andersen Partnership. I'm currently on my own in a service department in Sydney as I look to move the family from Perth to the Sydney office.
So Cuban cigar, bottle of whiskey out, overlooking the
Mate, I wish. Yeah, I wish. I've booked myself into some. It's not in a good area. I need to learn Sydney better. I don't know where I am, but it's it's not what I thought I was booking. But it'll do.
So it's not like you just have been in recruitment for 5 minutes and then you got the big job. You've
No, I think what is it? What are we to? 17 years this November.
17 years, man. And I'm not a genius with math, but if you are only 40 years old, you got into it at 23, right?
23. Yeah, just before my 24th birthday. Yeah.
Why recruitment?
Simple answer is probably the opportunity to make money. It was never the plan. I often joke with people when I interview them, no one ever played recruitment consultant as a child. Do you know what I mean? It wasn't a game. It wasn't your thought process. The plan was to do something in sport or be a PE teacher. Studied sports science at uni. Spent a bit of time in America coaching football as you do. Came back, worked in a school. Really enjoyed it, but like when you look at it, the earning potential was slow and it wasn't that big. And as much as I loved it, even at that age, I think my ambition to be able to impact my earnings, I think that's the big thing. The thing I really liked about the idea of recruitment, and I'd done a bit of telesales at uni, was that the harder I worked or the better I was, the greater my earning potential. And I really liked that.
Who persuaded you to get into it then?
Do you know what? No, but it's one of those weird things. I moved back to Birmingham. I'd split up with the girl I was seeing at the time. Went back to Brum.
You were dumped.
Didn't know what I wanted. Hey?
You were dumped, right?
Yeah, I was dumped. Yeah, of course I was. Yeah.
Sorry.
Hey. It was mutual and amicable, Dualta. But yeah, so, I chose to go down myself back to Birmingham. And I went and met recruiters just trying to get a temp gig and just thought I could do this. And then, as you do, jumped online. You see these big OTEs thrown around by the IT firms at that point. A rec to rec picked up I wish I remember her name. She was great, but a rec to rec picked up my CV and put me in touch with Badenoch and Clark. When I met with them, she prepped me really well. I think they asked me the pen question, which was awesome. Sell me this pen, got through it all, and yeah, just really loved it from there.
What was BNC like back then? We'll hear some horror stories.
Yeah, do you know what? It's funny because I was actually, just before I came on, I listened to Richard Miles's podcast, and I think he was in there in 97. I started in 2002. I think it had calmed down a bit. So the chap who was running at that point was a guy called Paul O'Hara, really good guy. Look, still an excellent place to learn your trade. They trained you really well. We were still faxing CVs, but I was listening to what you were talking to Richard about, and it definitely wasn't that. Yeah. It was there were some really good people in there that I really respect. I think a couple of the, if you use a better phrase, the wider boys or more old school recruiters have maybe moved on, and the culture was a bit different when I joined.
Walk me through your kind of journey at BNC, because you were there for 10 years, right?
Yeah, started off temp, transactional finance, Staffordshire, so Wolverhampton and Cannock, the rock and roll centres of the Midlands. I had letters in those areas, as you do, but got really dumb and lucky with a couple of businesses, managed to tap into a couple of shared services, and I think managed to grow my temp book to, I think it was 41, 42 at some point. Did really well, got promoted, really enjoyed my time there, really great people, really great training. Continued on the journey. GFC hit, and that just changed everybody's world in recruitment, I think. It was in the UK at the time.
When the GFC hit, how many people were you managing? What was your kind of remit?
So we had, I was thinking about this, I think it was 12 at the time. I could be wrong, but I was trying to think back. It was about 12. And
pretty young to be managing 12 people, hey?
Sorry?
You would have been pretty young to be managing 12 people at that stage.
Yeah, probably. Yeah, that would have been what. But it was just a natural growth. I had a really good support team. Richard was really good. Paul was really good. It might have been less. I was trying to think through the numbers, but basically, I remember in 2008 we went into the year, say, with 12 people in accounting and finance, and within 7 months there were 4 of us. Wow. And it was the gnarly old experienced guys. I was the youngest one. It was the people who sort of knew what they were doing. Anyone who was new to it just sort of fell by the wayside.
How did you survive?
Just look, we were lucky that we had a decent temp book. So we were lucky that we had a good contractor book that continued to pay for us. I was lucky that my boss at the time, Paul, gave me the legal team as well to sort of supplement what I was looking after. And you were just happy really to, you saw whole swathes of people coming out of the likes of Hayes and the bigger places, and they just literally removed like 3 or 4 layers of management. And again, just because I was listening, just Richard, I think, made the point that he looked at it at that point, and actually it was a lesson that I realized very quickly, that you sort of never want to be too much of a cost on a business, because, they can get rid of you pretty quickly. So survive by just having been in the market a long time, knowing what you're doing. There was enough business to keep you ticking over, and you just sort of batten down the hatches.
Well, why didn't you move abroad at that moment? Why did you hang on for a bit?
Yeah, do you know what? It's a really good question. I'm embarrassed to say it just never occurred to me. I guess I was just enjoying Birmingham.
You're like,
as
without pretending to know you too well, like you're quite a tunnel focused type of character, aren't you?
Yeah.
So maybe it's something to just do with that hyper focus that you have when you're kind of in your zone. To watch you work is a unique feat.
Hey mate, I've chilled out. Don't you worry.
As they all say.
I think, look, because actually I was working with Rich Harker, who's MD in the UK, I think for McEldowie at the moment. He moved over to Sydney actually, and he did really well with Hudson, ran New Zealand. But it just never occurred to me. Me and my now wife, what we actually did is we actually took a sabbatical in 2010, 11, and we actually just travelled.
Where'd you go?
South America, New Zealand, Australia, Southeast Asia. So we did it over 7 months. B&C were really good to me, kept my job open. I got really dumb and lucky with a deco taking over us, and they basically built a shared service centre in Solihull. And they got my team to basically recruit all the roles for the group. And we ended up doing like intercompany billing with them, and ended up billing an absolute fortune.
What led you to making the move to Australia?
So, and I won't talk about him too much. Rich Harker, he was in Sydney at the time with Hudson and was about to move across to New Zealand, I think, to run their New Zealand branch. And he just messaged me to sort of say, I'm moving on. There could be a role in Hudson Sydney here. Are you interested? And I messaged him back. Me and Joe were back from traveling.
Yeah, so your head was turned, hey?
From
from opening up your horizons and doing a bit of traveling. It's very hard to go back to the way things were.
No, I said no, mate. I was happy. I was happy back in Birmingham. I said no. I was like, no, I'm all right. I'm not going anywhere. Me and Joe were getting married that year in Thailand. I was happy. I had my plans, and then I forgot about it. And I think I mentioned it to Joe over dinner. And I'll never forget this. She just put a knife and fork down and just looked at me and was like, what? I was like, oh, Rich just suggested we might move to Australia. I said, but of course we're not going. But apparently we were, Dualta. And I learned a very valuable lesson before we got married at that point, is that exactly who is boss in our relationship.
Well, you're talking to a man that's living in the village where his wife is from, south of England. So I have empathy for you.
Yeah.
But no sympathy, because it was a great move.
Yeah, absolutely. And it was an interesting journey, that was, because we initially started to look at Sydney. The Sydney market had a bit of a flow through. So once I sort of started to look at it, interestingly, Hudson had actually not re-recruited Richard's role a few months later. A few of the businesses I knew a couple had sort of stopped recruiting in Sydney. So I was going through a bit of a tough time. But I started to have a couple of conversations, and then a few people suggested Perth to me, and we'd never been to Perth, didn't really know a lot about it. It's not that one of those places you visit, but I think at the time that would have been February 2012 sort of time, and I think the boom was probably in full flow at that point, the mining boom in Perth.
It would have been all right, yeah.
I think it was still kicking.
Yeah.
And we did our research about, we were married, 32, 33, looking to have kids, did a bit of research and liked the look of Perth. So started having some conversations.
Who did you speak to when you were doing that?
I spoke to Hudson, but I really didn't like the guy running the Perth office at all. He wasn't actually there much. He wasn't there for about 2 months after that conversation. I don't know who he was. I can't remember what he was called, but yeah, I didn't enjoy him. The guy I was talking to at Robert Half in Sydney, I don't think was really happy that I changed my mind because I had a few conversations with him. He said he'd put me on to the Perth people, but never did.
Oh, really?
Yeah, which interestingly, I think might have been Eddie Cross or Dave at the time.
Yeah. Your arch nemesis.
Moving on. And then I saw an advert randomly in the UK for a job in Perth that was basically me. It was a £10 F recruiter, build a temp desk, experience, all this type of stuff. And it was through a rec to rec, a guy called Andrew Broster, I think. And it was actually for a company called Bilby. Do you ever come across Bilby? What?
I think only when I was in Perth that they were like a semi-executive search type firm.
Yeah, exactly that. So had a chat with them, and then Andrew suggested Robert Walters because he'd done a lot of work with them in London. He had some links with Giles Daubeny there, so I went and had a chat to them. Really liked Giles, really liked the business, and was talking to Bilby and Robert Walters, and Bilby actually had more money on the table, but it was a startup. They had nothing there, and I was a bit nervous about moving all the way across the world. They were actually offering me more money, but I just actually preferred Robert Walters.
And Ryan is a very, very. The longer I'm out of there, the more I can appreciate how good he is at selling the business.
Oh, he's a charismatic man in terms of that ability. And look, Craig's a really good guy. I spoke to Craig and Ryan over VC, and everything seemed very common sense. I asked about the discretionary bonus. The way they positioned it made perfect sense to me. And
in fairness to that, I think if you're a junior that's coming in and the business is handing you a lot, then like I was when I started, then that discretionary bonus is fair enough.
Yeah. Well, the way it was positioned, I had a chat to Ryan about this, and the way it was sold to me a little bit was because bear in mind, my plan was to go across not in any management capacity. I know you've asked me about this before, but
yeah,
there was a clear plan in my mind that was basically I didn't want to have to worry about anyone else but me. So I knew I could control my performance. I knew I could I thought I was pretty comfortable I could make money. So, but my plan wasn't to be in that position for that long. So the way I spoke to Ryan about it, he sort of said the great thing for their discretionary bonus was, somebody's had a really good quarter, they've done well, they've just missed out on bonus. And, I've been in positions where you've got someone who's good in your team, they've put all the effort in and, for whatever reason, they've just not covered threshold. He sort of sold it to say, in those scenarios, we can probably pay them, a couple of grand just to say, well done. And I like that. I like the idea that it was a bit, teamy and a bit flexible. Unfortunately, I think the reality is a little bit different, but that's how that was positioned to me.
Yeah, I was taken care of quite well.
Yeah.
But I think that's because I was doing all right, and maybe some other people weren't who were kind of maybe closer to the bottom end of the billing spectrum. But I didn't care about that. I just want to get paid. But hey, that's that. But so I still can't get my head around this, but like, so 10 years of experience, still
Yeah.
happy to be on the tools, like
Yeah.
still conscious that that's what you need to do, which is a really great thing. And most people don't have it. After 10
Yeah.
years, they're like looking for a way to become an administrator.
Yeah.
So you sit down, you speak to Ryan, he explains where the business is at. You're experienced enough to look at it, look at the people in there, looking at the numbers that they've generated, looking at the market scope and all the rest.
Yeah.
And you go in as a senior consultant, and
Yeah.
that blows my mind, because I was a senior consultant in there at the time, and I remember thinking, how did they manage to do this? This guy's gonna burn this place down. He's not going to be able to sit there and do this.
I wasn't that bad.
Bad is not the word. Like, I think it, and to be transparent, I think, like, viewing it from the outside, I was like, oh, this guy's a bit of a force of nature. And then it was like, how will he handle not being able to affect change that affects him? And I think that probably ultimately was the piece, wasn't it?
Yeah, I think, look, bear in mind, you look back now, and I've learned more in the last 6 years. Like, I was 10 years with BNC. I loved it. They're a great business. Look, they obviously, Adecco buying them has changed it. Some of my best friends still work there. Wouldn't say a bad word against it. From a career perspective, I think I was there too long. But I think I would have left if the GFC hadn't hit. I think, you get to that 5-6 year point. I think I might have looked at something else, but at that point, I was really just happy to have a job, and it wasn't the time to move.
That leads me to an interesting question, and I'll let you carry on with that. But you suffered through the GFC and came out of it well, and like, you survived it and that. And then we had a mini crash in Perth, right?
Yeah.
Did the adversity that you'd learned how to deal with on mass scale, was that it? Were you able to kind of put everything into perspective and go,
yeah,
this isn't a real crash?
Yeah, I think so. I think that probably really helped me when I landed, because I guess just, if you think about it, and you're saying about, the whole Robert Walters piece, but I accepted the role 6 months before I moved. And at that point, I remember talking to Ryan and Craig, and it was still booming. It was like, come to Perth, it's amazing. Everything the world was brilliant. And then I think it was the November, December before I came across in the Jan, and a few things changed in the market. And I think a few things changed for them. But for me, I landed in Perth, and, I've often said this to you, you were making good money, you were doing all the right things. I think a lot of the consultants in that room, and this had just gotten used to the way it was in the boom. And there was still money out there. I think you just had to work harder for it. And I think, having come from the GFC and not knowing anything different, I think that really helped.
Yeah. I still can't believe how lucky I was to kind of get into like a business that had so many key accounts and had so much that like was handed to me. When now running my own business, it's very clear to me that, and I think when people are thinking of moving to Australia, I don't necessarily say to them, look, you need to join the biggest business. You kind of need to join a manager that has a lot of relationships, or at least can scope out and guide you through, the market piece. I think that's one of the key things, because it's not as transactional as the UK, isn't it not?
Nah, definitely not. I actually really enjoyed doing business in Perth. I think it's brilliant. Again, I was listening to some of your podcasts, and you're talking about the different markets, the different ways to do business. And, I had to learn Perth a little bit, but it was good to join a business like Robert Walters and Craig and those guys who knew the market. And I actually found the Robert Walters name opened a lot of doors for me. So, that was part of the reason why I chose them over Bilby at the time.
It was a good decision.
Because they never kicked it off. That was the thought process there. You're going back to it. And I think what I was going to say earlier was a little bit, I think I was a bit institutionalized, 10 years at the same company. I think there was still a little bit of naivety about a few things for me. Just having been in the one organization. I've caught up with Ryan since, and, I still have a bit of guilt that I left so quickly. I do wonder whether any business would have just been too different for me from what I was used to. I almost needed that that in between business to I don't know.
Yeah,
You think about these
I
things.
can understand what you're saying. I think you probably were a bit institutionalized,
Yeah.
but the other thing about moving away is you don't have a safety net. Your wife probably didn't have a big job at the time or anything,
Nah.
so it's like I have to make this happen. So
Yeah.
you can just be like, I was very relentless, and I don't know, like I knew that if that didn't work out, there wasn't a plan B, you know.
Yeah.
And
No, exactly.
and I kind of just had that tunnel vision as well, that was my shot, and yeah, luckily it worked
No,
out. The bit, so it's funny, right? So mutual friend of ours, Dara, had moved over to Walker Andersen, and I remember they were all asking me like, "Is this guy's numbers are good? Is he as good as that?" And I remember myself and other
absolutely
guys,
not.
my Glenn, were like, I mean, he's going to shake it up if you bring him. Like, if you want somebody who's going to come in and be a force of nature and build loads and just like set the tone, then yeah, absolutely. You mentioned to me that you've mellowed a little bit?
Yeah, I've definitely mellowed.
Is that something like you have? Do you like how do you mellow that intensity? Is it, or do you channel it better, or because
you just
I don't say this in a negative way. I think it's like the best quality a recruiter can have.
You probably saw like Shawn Twomey 4.0. You basically talk about, you know what I mean? Like, you talk about a need, a mission. You're right. Look, there was a conscious decision to go in there as a senior. I was looking to make my mark. I had it in my head. I wasn't there to make friends. I probably succeeded in that basis. I was there to make money. You know, you talk about intensity. You know, you look around that room, you were doing it. Jordo was doing it. I was doing it. And there were certain people, or there's probably a couple I've forgotten, who were making money. And we were all the ones who were just in there to make money.
Yeah.
And that, I went in with a bit of a mission. And, you know, I actually think I chilled out a bit even before I left Walters. It just, you know, the moment for me where it all started to, so I guess for me, the whole discretionary bonus, my plan was always to get back to management, you know, try and move things forward. I have no desire to work in an organization where I cannot reward fully somebody who has made me money. And the discretionary system did not ring true for me. So the moment I looked at that and thought, I don't want to run a team where where it's not clear, or there's some element where I'm holding commission back, that's when I switched off.
And what was it like going into, because they weren't a complete startup, like obviously the guys had moved across and kind of set up a framework.
Yeah.
What were you in to manage a team from day one?
I went across as a manager. I had 2, maybe 3 in there.
And
Dave.
You've been really successful as a manager. What do you think you brought to the table, given your previous experience of having so much like experience, like managing teams on a larger scale? What was that like now? So you've gone from big management to being a senior con to going back up climbing the management route.
Yeah, I genuinely, I look back to how I managed at Baydon Clark in the UK and just think, I'm trying to think in a nice way, but I was a bit of an idiot at times.
Do you think maybe that's a young man thing?
Potentially, mate. Potentially. I think you just don't know what you don't know sometimes. And the biggest things I've learned, and don't get me wrong, man, you know, we messed up a lot at Walker Andersen. The big things I've learned are culture is key. Make the right hiring decisions. Be honest and get people to buy into you. And teach them how to do the job and the why, so that they do it for themselves. So you don't have to constantly manage them. I'm not a manager. If people need me to motivate them or bring the, if I need you to motivate me, do all that. That's not me. What I should be doing is teaching you the why, making you better, making your life easier. And I think that's what we started to get right at Walker Andersen in Perth and Sterling Andersen Partnership in Perth was work really hard on culture, getting the right people and the right behaviors.
Well, what type of things like were you looking for to make sure that you had the right people? Because you mentioned that when you were viewing like the room and Walters at the time, maybe there was a lot of people just coasting beneath that, like just not being too much of a cost on the business, but not really advancing their own career, maybe being recruitment tourists. And then maybe there's a few others that are a law unto themselves. Like how did you get that middle line right?
Yeah, it's a really good question. I don't think anyone has the perfect answer, and I still don't think I do. I think the key is what you're trying to do is make more good hires than bad. You'll still make mistakes. A proper, robust process is key. Giving people the opportunity. Hiring the person, not the CV. So, recruitment's one of those great things where, you talk about, you got your shot. I was listening to yours and Dara's podcast and you were talking about your background. I was a teacher from sport. There is no stereotypical recruiter, but that creates challenges when you're trying to hire them. So, it comes back to hunger, desire, a decent human being, just a normal person who's got a bit of get up and go.
I've met your boss before. He's a fantastic character.
Which one?
Niall,
yeah.
And what was it like working so you've worked in these two giant organizations where the owners are so far removed and the ownership that it's like you're working for a brand and not a person. And to go and working for this guy that comes in jeans and a t-shirt and like that he's been on a journey and made a ton of cash before and he's in it again and you can feel that enthusiasm and straightness that he has about him. What was that like for you? Like you said you're institutionalized before. Now you're in a one-man institution.
I'd say the biggest thing I'd say is I've learned more at the Andersen Partnership in the last 5.5 years than I feel like I've learned more. I think part of that is having exposure to the real decision makers, people like Niall, bit of honesty, bit of clear business sense. Even, Dave built it, very different to people I've worked with before, Dara, Brian. It's really refreshing and it's really good. It comes with challenges, and it always will. You're working for, an individual who owns the business, which is both liberating because, it makes you to start really understand the decisions you're making, the impact they have, the financial impact they have. But it's also really cool to have exposure to those smart people.
So one thing led to another. You moved through the ranks over the next couple of years. People like you just kind of were on that trajectory.
Let's be clear. I made everyone else leave Perth, and I was last man standing.
you were definitely the last man standing, but I think you foreseen that. I think you could have a look at everybody who was ahead of you and go, like, I reckon you're strategic enough that you were plotting your way to very far up the food chain. Is that fair?
Look, yeah, there was, but to be fair, Dave was pretty open and honest with that type of stuff as well.
So was Dara.
And Dara. Look, Dara, I don't think Dara's plan was always Dublin. But the reality was these guys were growing. There was opportunities coming. It was exciting. It was fast paced, and I think my opportunity to get into the top level roles within the business, the trajectory was going to be quicker with the Andersen Partnership if I performed than I reckon anyone else.
Did you make sure you were billing the whole time?
Gotcha. I still bill. I'm still billing. I still run a desk. I'm going to run a desk in Sydney if I find time. I was running a desk in Perth. Absolutely.
So bring me on to that move to Sydney, and did that come as a shock that you got the main job? Because I can imagine it's competitive between like different directors who've maybe been there longer.
Yeah. Again, it's life's about timing, Dualta. So if you look at it, so director of Perth for 4 years, just gone. I managed to get really lucky and hire a guy called Mitch Hunt, who's exceptional, out of Robert Half. He became the director for the Walker brand. Mate, we got lucky with the market as well in Perth. I'm not going to sugarcoat it. We've done a lot of the right things to take advantage, but there's no doubt that Perth has come back, and that's allowed some really good growth.
How far back is it now?
I wasn't there for the true boom. I don't think it's anywhere near the real boom from what I hear, and we don't want it to be, but it's good. We've grown each year, and look, I've got people who I've hired now with no experience who are making money a lot quicker than some of the people I hired. There's a Francis Keenan who's back in Dublin now, and a chap called Shane Finity who works for Hayes here. They were both with me in Perth and Dara, and were really good recruiters, worked really hard, but it just didn't quite work. If you put them in the market now, I reckon they'd be flying. So I've been lucky that probably the timing is right for the business. It's for someone to step into this role. With 10 years, Brian and Niall have grown it to a really good position. And it just so happens that's coincided with Perth doing exceptionally well. Dualta?
And Shawn, when I look at this next piece for you, like, I'm trying to work out what I would do in that scenario. You know how all the businesses are doing, but you really know how the Perth office did. So all of a sudden now you need eyes on everything else.
Yeah.
Do you straight away go to statistics, measurables, all of those things, and measure it up against results?
No.
What do you do?
People. So
how do you do it?
Well, I guess it's, like I was talking about when you're building a team, you can't control everything. If you go too statty, you lose the people element. I've got a team of exceptional directors who run the offices. So the first thing I do is we get together, we engage. There's some key metrics we talk about, but the key will be that the people running the offices have to be able to do that capably, and I have to let them do that. A little bit like I was talking about the team, we have to work together. Those guys have to know the why, the how, and deliver it, because I'm not going to be able to control everything. So no, the first thing I do is engage with all of the individuals. I was on a plane. So I think you're asking me how it came about. Was it surprise? Yes. Niall, one of the amazing things about working for this size of business is that things happen really quickly. Niall just landed me, offered me the job. And that was on the Tuesday. I was on a plane to New Zealand on the Sunday.
Wow.
So, go on.
Yeah. So, what's your plans? Where do you sit now, and where do you see it going?
So I'm in Sydney. I think I said to you, so I'm sort of commuting a little bit. So, our Sydney office has been our flagship office for a long time. We are doing well there. We can do better. The two directors, Claire and John, are exceptional. So I'm in Sydney, working within the Walker commercial brand still. There's some plans for the business that will probably be revealed over the next couple of weeks externally. But internally, it's really just about making sure we have an engaged, happy, productive team in each office. And if people are trained well, if they're engaged and they're doing their jobs, they'll make money, which will make them happier, and the business will do well.
And what type of stuff can you do to ensure that? What does that mean for you now, the man that loves control, that Like, what love? Like, I feel like you're taking on a lot right now.
Yeah, look, I'm a bit spaced out. We're running it hard. Look, the reality is though, is it's not, Brian and Niall have I'm taking over a very well set up business, a very well run business. There's things that we can do better, which is great. So, the things that I will be doing is it's about visibility. The reality is I'm an MD of a business that has, 6 offices and 70 recruiters in it at the moment. So there's no reason why I can't be engaging with most of our staff. So the things that I can do is provide clear direction, be visible, look to imprint a positive culture. There's a few incentives we're doing. That's all the cherry on the cake. We're having a little look at our promotion criteria and some of the capabilities around that. But the reality is the stuff that I'm going to be doing is going to be about tweaking. It's not going to be a huge change program.
Yeah, sounds great. And what's the story at the moment in the Australian market with staff? How hard is it to get the right people? Where, like, I know the visa laws have changed, so it's made staff a bit more expensive for businesses to get people over. So it's created a bit of scarcity. Is like, how are you guys finding that?
Look, it's always tough. I don't think you'll know yourself. I don't think I've ever, any recruiter you ever talk to, or any director, any manager in any market, finding good talent, I think, is always tough. You make a really good point about the visa changes, but Dualta, I think you've made a few LinkedIn posts that are perfect common sense. Okay, if somebody's coming with a cost, then you just need to think about what your ROI is to the business. So as long as those people are paying for themselves, I think you put an article up recently around, making sure you're covering 3 times your salary, thinking commercially, then it's viable. So we're absolutely open to bringing people from the UK. And
I think just to explain what that means for anybody that's listening, your cost in Australia is going to be close to 100 grand a year at a minimum.
Yeah.
So for you to be billing 3 times that is not unreasonable, because if you break down that, like, that's only 2 placements a month.
Absolutely.
And not even every month. Like, that could be 2 placements, 10 months, and maybe 1 placement. You could have a couple of dodgy months, and you're still tripling your cost.
Yeah, absolutely. If you look at it, the average fee placement, one of the things that it was hard for me to get my head around coming to the UK was the actual size of the fees because of the salary differentiator. So, your average fee over here is probably about 15K. So 2 placements a month, that's 30K. 24 placements a year, that's 360 grand.
And divide that in half, and you've probably got where you would sit in the UK.
Yeah, exactly.
So again, that's not unreasonable. The bit I do get annoyed at this. People think like that just because they've done a year in recruitment that they should be able to get, and because everybody wants them in their local market, that they should be able to get that international move, when it's not. Like, you really have to earn it. You really have to show that you're not a flight risk, that you could go there and behave yourself and work hard and get to that 3 times your cost. And I find it hard to communicate that with everybody,
It's a difficult balance, isn't it? Because it's a huge risk from both parties, and it's a huge leap of faith, because, I don't know many people who come here and don't love it. Australia is a great place to live. Your point about working hard is true. It can be a bit, you can have a bit too much fun at times, which can impact it as well. So it's a risk from the individual's point of view. It's a risk from the business's point of view. So yeah, you've got to try and mitigate that as much as you can. And, track record, like you say, are they a flight risk? Having the opportunity to look at them before you sponsor them isn't the worst thing. If people can come over on a working holiday visa so they can try it out and we can look at them before sponsorship comes, that's probably the ideal scenario, because it just means that everyone gets a bit of comfort before committing fully.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, Shawn. Well, it's been a pleasure having you on here. If you have any advice to anybody who's thinking about moving to Australia, what would What would it be, given that given you've had a few different experiences now and it's really worked out for you?
I'd harper back to you asked Richard the same question. He'd made the move to America. I would say to anyone, just do it. I think whether it's Australia, whether it's America, whether it's even the Asian markets, the opportunity to just learn, expand your horizons, make some good money, and potentially change your life is there. And what's the worst that can happen? If you didn't enjoy it, you can always go back home. So if anybody's thinking about it, I would say just do it. The sun shines, the lifestyle's great over here, and it's actually a really good market to do business.
Fantastic, Shawn.
Cheers,
Talk soon.
Thanks, mate. Thanks for the time.
A massive thank you to Shawn for coming on the podcast. I love catching up with people from back in the day when we were out in Australia. I'm not surprised that Shawn has scaled the heights that he has. Some people just have that intensity about them. You meet a handful of them in recruitment. They're usually the top of the room. It's unusual for somebody to have really good management skills and to be a massive biller as well. And it seems like Shawn, through 17 years of experience, has managed to do both, which, it is really hard. And I haven't come across many of them. And yeah, I wish him all the best. I hope you guys all enjoyed that. If you do want to go to Australia, do hit me up. We're actively hiring for IT, finance, engineering, construction, renewable energy, medical, nursing, all this type of recruitment that's happening over there. It's a good, consistent marketplace. You'll usually start on 80,000 plus super if you have 3 years and a degree as experience. And you should make about 150 AUD in your first year or two. So if you're any use, that is. If you're not, you'll be back on the first boat home. But we don't hire those people. So if you are good, hit me up and we can make it happen for you. All right. And we'll be back later with another awesome podcast.
The podcast you just heard was made using Anchor. Ever thought about making your own podcast? Anchor makes it really easy for anyone to get started. It's a one-stop shop for recording, hosting, and distributing podcasts. Best of all, it's 100% free. Sign up now at anchor.fm/new. That's anchor.fm/new to get started.